The tank emerged from the museum like a metal ghost returning from the past. Its tracks crushed debris as it rolled into the burning streets of New Sol Colony. The night sky glowed orange from fires, and the sounds of battle echoed off the damaged buildings. Inside the tank, the three humans felt the machine's power beneath them. The engine rumbled with steady confidence, vibrations running through the steel hull. Ancient gauges glowed green in the darkness, showing that all systems were working. "Which way?" Wu Jin asked, his hands gripping the steering controls. The tank responded differently than any vehicle he had driven before, heavier and more deliberate in its movements. "Head for the city center," Tae-ho replied, studying a tactical map. "That is where the defense force is making their last stand." Through the periscopes, they could see the devastation the Korth had caused. Buildings were collapsed or burning. Abandoned vehicles filled the streets, and moving through it all were the enemy siege mechs, their massive forms outlined against the fires. "Contact front," Dayun called out, looking through the gunner's sight. "One siege mech about 800 meters. Tae-ho swung his own periscope toward the target. The Korth war machine stood 40 feet tall, its four legs giving it stability while its multiple weapon arms swept back and forth. Energy shields flickered around its body like a protective bubble. "That thing is enormous," Wu Jin whispered. "Size is not everything," Tae-ho said calmly. "Daun, can you get a clear shot?" "Yes, but grandfather, what if the shell bounces off its armor? Then we run. But first, let us see what happens when old Earth engineering meets alien technology." The siege mech had not noticed them yet. Its pilot, Sub-Commander Frektar, was focused on destroying the last human defense position ahead. In his mind, the battle was already won. These primitives had no weapons that could threaten his advanced war machine. "Target the center of mass," Tae-ho instructed. "Maximum penetration." Dayun adjusted the manual gun controls, lining up the ancient optical sight with the target. The siege mech filled her view, its energy shields pulsing with alien technology. Everything about it screamed advanced, deadly, superior. "Steady," Tae-ho said quietly. "Remember, this tank was built by people who understood war." Daun took a deep breath and pulled the trigger. The tank's main gun fired with a sound like the world splitting apart. The muzzle flash lit up the entire street, and the recoil made the 60-ton machine rock backward. The shell streaked across the distance faster than the eye could follow. The siege mech's energy shields flared as they detected incoming projectile. Automatic systems tried to deflect what they assumed was another energy weapon. But the shell was not energy. It was 40 pounds of hardened metal moving at incredible speed. The shell punched through the shields like they were made of air. It hit the mech's armor plating and kept going, tearing through layers of advanced materials as if they were paper. The explosion inside the mech was spectacular, lighting up the night as the war machine toppled backward and crashed into a building. "Direct hit," Dayun shouted. "The target is destroyed." For a moment, all three humans sat in stunned silence. They had actually done it. The ancient tank had destroyed one of the galaxy's most advanced war machines with a single shot. "How is that possible?" Wu Jin asked. "Their shields deflect energy, not matter," Tae-ho explained. "And their armor is designed to resist directed energy weapons, not kinetic penetrators. They have probably never faced anything like this." Across the battle zone, other Korth forces had detected the explosion. War Master Thekron himself was puzzled by the readings his sensors were showing. "What destroyed Unit 7? He demanded. "Unknown, War Master," replied his tactical officer. "The energy signature does not match any known human weapon. Send Unit 12 to investigate, and have them scan for any unusual activity." The tank was already moving, Wu Jin steering it through the rubble-filled streets. They had to keep moving because staying in one place would make them an easy target. "Another mech, 2 o'clock, Daun called out. This one had spotted them. Its pilot, seeing the destroyed remains of Unit 7, was much more cautious. The mech moved quickly between buildings using cover while it tried to identify this new threat. "He knows we are dangerous now," Tae-ho observed. "This will be harder." The mech appeared around a corner, weapons already firing. Energy bolts streaked toward the tank, striking its armor in brilliant flashes. But the tank's thick steel plating, designed to stop kinetic rounds, absorbed the energy impacts with only scorch marks to show for it. "Their weapons cannot penetrate our armor," Dayun reported with excitement. "Return fire," Tae-ho ordered. This time the mech was ready. When Daun fired, the pilot tried to dodge. The shell missed by inches, smashing into the building behind the target. But the near miss convinced the mech pilot that retreat was the better option. The war machine turned and fled. Should we pursue? Wu Jin asked. No, let it spread the word. Fear is a weapon too. They continued toward the city center where the sounds of fighting were loudest. Along the way, they encountered more Korth forces. Each engagement followed the same pattern. The aliens' energy weapons could not penetrate the tank's armor, while the tank's shells punched through their defenses like they were made of cardboard. So Young Kang, a communications officer with the defense force, was the first to witness what happened next. She was hiding in a damaged building when she saw the tank roll past, its cannon firing at a group of Korth infantry. Command, this is Kang, she radioed urgently. I am seeing something impossible. There is an old Earth tank out here and it is destroying Korth forces. Say again, Kang, did you say a tank? Confirmed. It looks like something from a museum, but it just took out 3 siege mechs and a full infantry squad. The Korth weapons are not even scratching it. The news spread quickly through the human defense network. Soldiers who had been preparing to surrender suddenly had hope. Civilians in the shelters heard the radio chatter and began to believe they might survive. But the tank's crew knew they were still vastly outnumbered. For every mech they destroyed, there were dozens more, and eventually the Korth would adapt their tactics. We need to do something dramatic, Taeho said as they paused to reload, something that will make them think twice about this invasion. What do you suggest? Taeun asked. Taeho studied his tactical map, noting the positions of Korth forces. Most of them were concentrated around the government district, where they expected to capture the human leadership. But there was one target that would get everyone's attention. The Korth command ship, he said finally. It is sitting in the main plaza, probably coordinating the ground assault. You want to attack their flagship? Wu Jin asked in disbelief. I want to show them that nowhere is safe from this old tank. They drove through the burning city toward the plaza. Behind them, word of their impossible victories was spreading. The ancient tank had become a symbol of human defiance, proof that the old ways could still triumph over advanced technology. But ahead of them waited War Master Thekaron himself, and he was not planning to underestimate human ingenuity again. The museum basement shook with each explosion outside. Diane knelt beside the old tank, her hands already working to remove access panels. The machine looked even more ancient up close, with cables and mechanical parts that seemed impossibly simple compared to modern technology. Are you sure about this? Wu Jin asked nervously. He kept glancing at the ceiling as dust fell from the latest impacts. Even if we get it running, how do we get it out of here? The museum has a cargo bay, Taeho explained, pulling out a thick manual from a storage crate. This building was designed to move large exhibits. There is a ramp that leads directly to the street. Dayun had already opened the engine compartment and was examining the massive mechanical heart of the machine. This is incredible, she muttered. Everything is manual. No computer controls, no automated systems. Just pure mechanical engineering. My grandfather always said that was the beauty of these machines, Taeho said, flipping through pages of technical diagrams. Nothing to hack, nothing to jam, nothing to go wrong except basic mechanical failure, which after 200 years is a real possibility, Daun pointed out. She pulled out her engineering tools and began testing systems. The engine block looks solid, but we need to check everything. Fuel lines, electrical systems, hydraulics. Wu Jin was pacing nervously. I should get that fuel and ammunition. How much do we need? Taeho consulted his manual. The tank holds about 500 gallons of fuel. For ammunition, he paused, calculating. The main gun fires shells that weigh about 40 pounds each. We can carry maybe 40 rounds total. 40 rounds against an entire army, Wu Jin said. This really is crazy. Go, Daun told him without looking up from her work. Get whatever you can. We will worry about making it work. As Wu Jin left, Daun continued her examination of the tank. The more she looked, the more impressed she became. Every part was built to last, over-engineered for reliability rather than efficiency. The armor was layers of different metals, designed to absorb and deflect impacts rather than relying on energy fields. Grandfather, how do you know so much about these machines? She asked while testing the electrical systems. When I was young, I was obsessed with military history, Taeho replied. My grandfather told me stories, and I wanted to understand everything about the machines he had used. I studied manuals, talked to veterans, even found some old training videos. Good thing you did. Da-In found the main power switch and tried it. Nothing happened. The battery is completely dead. We need to jump-start it somehow. There is an emergency power unit in the maintenance room, Taeho suggested, designed for starting large equipment. They worked quickly to connect cables from the portable power unit to the tank's electrical system. On the third try, lights began flickering on inside the tank's cabin. Ancient gauges came to life, showing fuel levels, temperature, and dozens of other readings. "It has power," Daeun said with satisfaction. Now for the hard part. The engine was a massive diesel motor designed to run on almost any kind of fuel. Daeun checked the fuel lines and found them surprisingly clean. Someone had maintained this machine even in the museum. The former curator was very dedicated, Taeho explained when she asked. He believed all the exhibits should be kept in working condition, just in case. Just in case of what? This, apparently. Woo Jin returned with a truck full of supplies. He had brought industrial diesel fuel, metal stock for making ammunition, and most importantly, Hyun Soo-nam, the colony's head of maintenance. "This is the craziest thing I have ever seen," Hyun-soo said, looking at the tank. "But if anyone can make it work, it is Daeun. I brought everything I could find." They worked together to fuel the tank and begin manufacturing ammunition. Using the maintenance shop's metalworking equipment, they created shells from starship hull material, which was much harder than anything used in ancient tank warfare. "These shells will be much more effective than the originals," Hyun-soo explained as he programmed the fabrication unit. "Modern metallurgy makes them denser and stronger." While the shells were being made, Daeun and Taeho worked on the tank itself. They tested every system, replacing worn parts and updating what they could. The machine was remarkably well preserved, but 2 centuries had taken their toll. "The targeting computer is completely broken," Daeun reported, "but the manual systems still work." "Good," Taeho said. "Targeting computers can be hacked or jammed. A skilled gunner with manual controls is harder to stop. You know how to operate this thing?" "In theory. I have studied the manuals for 20 years and practiced on simulation programs I found in the archives. That is not the same as real experience." "No," Taeho admitted, "but it is what we have." The sounds of battle outside were getting closer. Through the small windows they could see the glow of fires across the colony. Occasionally, the massive shape of a Korth siege mech would pass by, its weapons lighting up the night as it destroyed anything that moved. "How long until they reach the civilian shelters?" Daeun asked. "Maybe 2 hours," Woo Jin replied grimly. "The defense force is falling back to the city center, but they cannot hold much longer." "Then we need to hurry." Daeun wiped sweat from her face and looked at their progress. The tank now had fuel, power, and the first batch of ammunition was ready. But there were still dozens of systems to check. "I can drive it," Woo Jin offered. "I trained on wheeled vehicles in basic training." "This is different," Taeho warned. "Much heavier, tracked instead of wheels, and completely manual transmission." But yes, the basics are similar. As they worked, Hyun-soo finished the ammunition and began loading it into the tank. Each shell was a work of art, precisely machined and perfectly balanced. "These should punch through anything," he said proudly. "Will they punch through force shields?" Daeun asked. "Force shields deflect energy, not matter," Hyun-soo explained. "These shells are solid metal moving at over a mile per second. Physics says they should go right through." "Should?" "Physics has been wrong before." Finally, after 4 hours of desperate work, they were ready to try starting the engine. Daeun had checked every system she could think of. Woo Jin had practiced with the driving controls. Taeho had studied the gunnery manual one more time. "Everyone ready?" Daeun asked, her hand on the starter switch. They all nodded. She pressed the button. The starter motor whined. The engine turned over once, twice, then died. "More fuel priming," Taeho suggested. They tried again. This time the engine coughed, sputtered, and almost caught before dying again. "Come on," Daeun whispered. "You have slept for 200 years. Time to wake up." The third time the engine roared to life with a sound like thunder. The entire building shook as the massive diesel motor settled into a steady rumble. Gauges showed normal pressure and temperature. "The beast was awake. It works," Woo Jin said in amazement. "It actually works. Now we find out if we can fight with it," Taeho said grimly. Outside, a new sound joined the battle noise. Somewhere in the distance, evacuation alarms were wailing. The Korth had reached the civilian areas. "Time to go," Daeun said. She climbed into the tank's turret while Taeho took the commander's position, and Woo Jin slid behind the driver's controls. The cargo bay doors opened with a rumble, revealing the burning colony outside. For the first time in over 2 centuries, a human tank was going to war. 3 days after the exhibition ended, the warning sirens began screaming across New Sol Colony. The sound echoed off the tall buildings and sent people running for cover. In the defense center, Ji-hye Choi stared at her screens in disbelief. "How many ships?" she asked her assistant, her voice tight with fear. "Over 300, Commander," replied the young officer. "They appeared at the edge of the system 20 minutes ago. Long-range sensors identify them as Korth Dominion vessels." Ji-hye felt her stomach drop. The Korth were known throughout the galaxy as ruthless conquerors. They traveled from system to system, enslaving any species they considered weak. Unlike the Vextari or Nethri, who looked down on humans but mostly ignored them, the Korth saw weakness as an opportunity. "Send a message to the Galactic Council," Ji-hye ordered. "Request immediate assistance." "Already tried, Commander. The nearest council fleet is 6 days away." 6 days. Ji-hye looked at the tactical display showing the approaching Korth ships. "They would be here in 6 hours, not 6 days. All defense stations prepare for combat," she announced over the colony-wide communication system. "This is not a drill. We are about to be attacked by a superior force. All civilians should move to emergency shelters immediately." Across the colony, people dropped what they were doing and ran. Parents grabbed their children, workers abandoned their jobs, and within an hour the streets were empty except for Defense Force personnel. At the museum, Taeho was helping pack up the exhibition when the alarm started. Diane burst through the door, her face pale with worry. "Grandfather, we need to leave now," she said urgently. "The Korth are coming." Taeho looked around at the displays they had spent days setting up. The old tank sat in the center, looking as peaceful as it had during the exhibition. "Help me secure everything first. There is no time." Dayun grabbed his arm. "Woojin is already moving people to the shelters. The Defense Force says we have maybe 6 hours before they arrive." As they worked quickly to cover the displays, Woojin ran in wearing his combat gear. His face was grim, and he carried his rifle like he expected to use it soon. "The Korth have been monitoring our communications," he reported. "Intelligence thinks they watched the exhibition broadcasts and decided we would be easy targets." "How many ships do they have?" Taeho asked. "Over 300. Plus they are bringing ground forces. Our scouts report massive siege mechs, each one the size of a building." Daeun stopped packing. "Siege mechs? How are we supposed to fight those?" "We are not," Woojin said honestly. "Commander Choi hopes our plasma turrets and missile batteries can hold them off until help arrives. But everyone knows the truth. The Korth would not attack unless they were sure they could win." The first Korth ships entered orbit 4 hours later. They were massive black vessels that blocked out the sun as they passed overhead. The colonists watching from shelter windows felt their hearts sink at the sight. From the lead ship, War Master Thekron studied the human colony below. He was a massive creature, over 10 feet tall, with thick armor-like skin and 4 powerful arms. His species had conquered 17 different worlds, and humans would make 18. "Begin the assault," he ordered his fleet. "Target their defense installations first. Leave some buildings intact. We will need slaves to work in the mines." The first wave of attacks came from orbit. Energy beams lanced down from the Korth ships, striking the colony's defense towers. The humans had built their defenses using the best technology they could buy from other species, but it was not enough. Plasma turrets that had cost millions of credits were destroyed in seconds. Missile batteries exploded in brilliant flashes. Shield generators overloaded and shut down. Within an hour, most of the colony's fixed defenses were gone. "Sir, their orbital defenses are down," reported Thekron's tactical officer. "Ready to deploy ground forces. Excellent. Show these humans what real military technology looks like." The siege mechs descended from the Korth ships like metallic meteors. Each one stood 40 feet tall and bristled with weapons. Energy cannons protruded from their arms. Missile pods covered their shoulders, and force shields shimmered around their bodies. Ji-hye watched helplessly as her remaining defense teams tried to fight the mechs. Human soldiers fired their best weapons, but the energy bolts bounced harmlessly off the Korth force shields. Meanwhile, the mechs returned fire with devastating effect, turning buildings to rubble with single shots. "Evacuation Shuttle 3 is down," reported one of her officers. "The mechs are targeting anything that tries to leave the atmosphere." "What about our fighters?" Ji-hye asked desperately. "All destroyed or damaged beyond repair. Commander, we need to consider surrender." The word hung in the air like poison. Ji-hye had never surrendered anything in her life, But she could see the reality of their situation. The Korth had better weapons, better armor, and vastly superior numbers. In the museum shelter, Da-un paced back and forth while her grandfather sat quietly. Other colonists huddled together, listening to the sounds of battle outside. Every explosion made them jump, and every minute brought the enemy closer. "There has to be something we can do," Da-un said suddenly. "We cannot just sit here waiting to be captured." "The defense force is doing everything possible," Wu Jin replied, though his voice lacked conviction. "No, not the defense force, us. There has to be something." Da-un looked around the museum at all the old weapons and equipment. Her eyes stopped on the covered tank in the center of the room. "Grandfather," she said slowly, "you said that tank was battle-tested, right? That it was reliable?" Taeho followed her gaze. "Yes, but Da-un, it has not run in decades. The fuel system is disconnected, there is no ammunition, and even if we could make it work..." "Even if we could make it work, what?" she challenged. "It would still be just one old tank against an army of advanced war machines?" "Exactly." Da-un was quiet for a moment, thinking. Outside, another explosion shook the building. "Grandfather, what did your grandfather tell you about tank warfare?" "Many things." "Why do you ask?" "Tell me the most important thing." Taeho thought back to his childhood, remembering stories told by an old man who had lived through real wars. He said that in battle it is not always the most advanced weapon that wins. Sometimes it is the weapon that the enemy does not expect, does not understand, and cannot prepare for. "The Korth have never fought tanks before," Da-un said quietly. "No, probably not. Their weapons are designed to fight energy-based technology like their own. And their force shields? Designed to stop energy weapons and guided missiles." Da-un looked at the tank again. "What about kinetic projectiles? Old-fashioned cannon shells?" Taeho was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "Force shields work by deflecting incoming energy. They are not designed to stop solid objects moving at high velocity. So theoretically, a tank shell could punch right through a force shield like it was not even there." Another explosion, closer this time. Through the small window they could see the glow of fires spreading across the colony. "Grandfather," Da-un said firmly, "can you make that tank run?" "I do not know. Maybe. But it would take time and we would need fuel, ammunition." "I can get those things," Wu Jin said suddenly. Both of them turned to look at him. "The maintenance depot has industrial fuel and metal stock. If we could manufacture shells..." "This is crazy," Taeho said. "One tank against an entire invasion force." "One tank they will never see coming," Da-un corrected. "One tank using weapons they have never faced before." Outside, the sounds of battle were getting closer. Soon the Korth would reach the civilian shelters. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Galactic Defense Exhibition on Kepler 442b. Hundreds of alien species had gathered to show off their best weapons and military technology. The massive exhibition hall buzzed with excitement as creatures from across the galaxy examined each other's war machines. Taeho Kim walked slowly through the human section, his old walking cane tapping against the metal floor. At 60 years old, his back was bent and his hair was completely gray, but his eyes were still sharp. He had been the curator of the Human Military Museum for 20 years, and today was the biggest day of his career. "Grandfather, are you ready for this?" asked Da-un Park, walking beside him. She was 28 years old, tall and confident, with oil stains on her work clothes. As a mechanical engineer, she spent most of her time fixing alien technology for the colony. Today she was helping her grandfather prepare their display. "Ready as we can be," Taeho replied, looking at their small section. Compared to the other exhibits, the human display looked pathetic. They had a few rifles, some body armor, and in the center an old tank that looked ancient compared to everything else. The tank was an M1A2 Abrams from Earth, over 200 years old. Its green and brown paint was faded and rust spots showed where the metal had aged. Next to the glowing energy weapons and floating combat drones of other species, it looked like a museum piece that belonged in the trash. "I still think we should have brought something more modern," said Wu Jin Lee, the young soldier assigned to guard their exhibit. He was only 22, fresh out of military training and clearly embarrassed by what they had to show. "This tank has history," Taeho said firmly. "My grandfather drove one like this in the Third Korean War." These machines have seen more battles than most species have seen years. The first visitors began arriving, and Tejo straightened his uniform. A group of tall, blue-skinned aliens approached first. They were from the Vextari Empire, known throughout the galaxy for their arrogance and advanced technology. Leading them was Ambassador Kreltos, a being who stood nearly 8 feet tall with 4 arms and glowing yellow eyes. His expensive robes marked him as nobility among his people. He looked at the human display and immediately started laughing. "Is this some kind of joke?" Kreltos asked, his voice carrying across the hall. Other aliens began gathering to see what was so funny. "Humans, you cannot be serious about this thing." He pointed one of his 4 fingers at the tank. "This is your best military technology? A metal box with wheels?" More aliens gathered around, including representatives from the Nethri Collective, a species known for building the most advanced starships in the galaxy. Their leader, an insect-like creature called Zixander, clicked his mandibles in what passed for laughter among his kind. "The humans use chemical explosions to move their weapons," Zixander announced to the crowd. "And look at this armor. It is just layers of metal. No energy shields, no plasma protection, nothing advanced at all." Tejo felt his face getting red, but he kept his voice calm. "This tank served humanity well for many decades. It is reliable and effective." "Reliable?" Kreltos laughed even louder. "My personal transport has more advanced technology than this entire machine. Look at our combat suits." He gestured to a nearby display where Vexitari soldiers demonstrated their equipment. Their armor glowed with energy fields that could stop any projectile. Their weapons fired beams of pure energy that could cut through solid metal like paper. "Our warriors do not need these crude machines," Kreltos continued. "We have evolved beyond such primitive tools. Perhaps humanity's acceptance into the Galactic Council was a mistake." The crowd of aliens murmured agreement. Dayun stepped forward, her hands clenched into fists. "You do not understand what you are looking at. This tank was built to last. It can fight in any environment, any weather, any conditions." "Fight what?" asked a reptilian alien from the Eschatar Federation. "Other primitive metal boxes? Child, our weapons would destroy this thing before it could even point its little cannon at us." Wu Jin looked like he wanted to disappear. He had joined the human defense force dreaming of flying advanced fighters and using energy weapons like the other species. Instead, he was standing guard over what looked like antiques. "The human section is quite small," observed another alien. This one from the peaceful Miran Republic. Unlike the others, she seemed genuinely curious rather than mocking. "Do you have larger displays elsewhere?" "This is everything," Tejo admitted. "Humanity is still new to space warfare. We brought what we thought best represented our military history." "History being the important word," Kreltos said with another laugh. "These weapons belong in a museum, not on a battlefield. What happens when you face a real enemy? Do you plan to throw these metal rocks at them?" The crowd laughed again. Some aliens took pictures of the tank like it was a funny curiosity. Others shook their heads and walked away, clearly unimpressed. Dayun watched her grandfather's face during all of this. She knew he was proud of human military tradition. His family had served in armies for generations, from Korea on Earth to the colonial defense forces here on Kepler 442b. Seeing their heritage mocked like this was painful for him. "Grandfather," she whispered, "maybe we should have brought the new plasma rifles instead." "No," Tejo said quietly. "These people do not understand. They see old metal and think weakness. They do not see the engineering, the battle-tested design, the reliability that kept soldiers alive for centuries." As the day continued, more aliens visited their display. Each group reacted the same way. First confusion, then amusement, then pity. The humans were clearly the laughingstock of the entire exhibition. Late in the afternoon, Kreltos returned with a larger group of Vextari officials. "I had to bring them to see this," he announced loudly. "The humans actually brought a ground vehicle that burns fossil fuels. Can you imagine? How do they aim without computer guidance?" asked one of his companions. "Manually," Tejo replied with dignity. "Human crews train for years to operate these machines effectively." "Train for years?" Kreltos was nearly crying with laughter. "Our warriors download combat skills in minutes. Training for years to use such simple tools proves how primitive your species truly is." As the exhibition closed for the day, Tejo, Dayun, and Wu Jin stood alone with their display. The tank sat silent and still, looking old and tired under the artificial lights. I am sorry, grandfather, Daun said softly. I know this was not what you hoped for. Taeho reached out and touched the tank's armor with his weathered hand. Your great-grandfather always said these machines had souls, he told her. He said they were built by people who understood that sometimes the old ways work best. None of them knew that in just 3 days, that old tank would prove him right in the most dramatic way possible. The central plaza of New Sol Colony had been transformed into a war zone. Korth troops surrounded the massive command ship that had landed there, while smaller vehicles moved supplies and wounded soldiers. In the center of it all stood War Master Thekron's personal mech, a monster machine twice the size of the others. From their position at the edge of the plaza, the tank crew could see the scope of their challenge. There were at least 50 Korth soldiers, a dozen smaller mechs, and the command ship itself bristling with weapons. This is suicide, Woojin said quietly, looking through his periscope. Maybe, Taeho replied. But sometimes suicide missions are the ones that change history. Daun was studying the target through her gun sight. The command mech has heavier armor than the others. And look at those energy readings. Its shields are much stronger. Then we will have to hit it more than once, Taeho said calmly. War Master Thekron had received reports about the mysterious human weapon that was destroying his forces. At first he had dismissed them as panic from inexperienced troops. But as more units reported encounters with an ancient metal vehicle, he began to take the threat seriously. Show me the tactical data, he ordered his intelligence officer. The holographic display showed the tank's path through the city, marked by destroyed Korth units. The pattern was clear. This single human vehicle had eliminated over a dozen mechs and countless infantry soldiers. What kind of weapon are they using? Thekron demanded. Kinetic projectiles, War Master. Solid metal shells fired by chemical propulsion. Chemical propulsion? Thekron laughed. How primitive. Yet it seems to be effective against our technology. Our shields and armor are designed to resist energy weapons, sir. This solid projectile technology is unexpected. Then we adapt. Order all units to use maximum firepower. Overwhelm this primitive machine with sheer volume of fire. At that moment, alarms began sounding throughout the Korth position. Sensors had detected the tank approaching the plaza. Here they come, Daun reported, watching enemy troops scramble into defensive positions. All units. This is War Master Thekron, came a broadcast over the Korth communication channels that the tank's radio could intercept. The primitive human weapon approaches. Show them the power of advanced technology. The first energy bolts came from the perimeter guards. Bright beams of deadly light struck the tank's armor, creating spectacular flashes but no real damage. The ancient steel plating had been designed to stop armor-piercing shells. Energy weapons were actually less effective. Return fire. Taeho ordered. Daeun's first shot took out a light mech that was coordinating the defense. The shell punched through its shields and armor like they were made of paper, creating a massive explosion that sent debris flying across the plaza. Direct hit. Target destroyed. But now every Korth weapon in the area was targeting them. Energy bolts, plasma missiles, and particle beams all converged on the tank's position. The ancient machine shook under the impacts, but its armor held. Hull breach in the rear compartment, Woojin reported as warning lights flashed. We are taking damage. Keep moving, Taeho ordered. Do not give them a stationary target. The tank rolled forward into the plaza, its treads crushing Korth equipment and forcing enemy soldiers to scatter. Daeun kept firing, each shot destroying another target. But there were too many enemies, and the tank was beginning to show the effects of concentrated fire. War Master Thekron watched the battle from his command mech, impressed despite himself. The human vehicle was primitive by galactic standards, but it was proving remarkably effective. Its crude armor was actually better protection than advanced energy shields against the weapons his forces carried. Enough, he growled. I will deal with this personally. His command mech strode forward, weapons powering up. This machine was his personal war chariot, equipped with the most advanced technology the Korth Dominion could produce. Its armor was 3 times thicker than standard mechs. Its shields could deflect battleship weapons, and its firepower could level city blocks. Major target approaching, Daun called out. That thing is huge. Taeho studied the command mech through his periscope. It was indeed massive, bristling with weapons and protected by energy fields so powerful they distorted the air around them. That must be their leader, he said. If we can destroy it, the others might retreat. Big if, Wu Jin muttered, steering the tank to avoid a missile strike. The command mech opened fire with everything it had. The barrage was incredible. Energy cannons, plasma missiles, particle beams, and weapons that had no names in human language. The tank disappeared in a cloud of explosions and energy discharges. For a moment, War Master Thekron thought he had won. Then the tank rolled out of the smoke cloud, battered but still fighting. Its main gun was already swinging toward him. "Impossible," he whispered. Dayun's shot struck the command mech's shields with tremendous force. The energy barrier flared brilliant white, overloading from the kinetic impact, but it held, absorbing the shell's energy and protecting the mech beneath. "No penetration," she reported. "Their shields are too strong." "Then we hit them again," Tejo said grimly, "and again until something breaks." What followed was a duel between old and new technology. The command mech poured devastating firepower at the tank, slowly wearing down its armor. The tank returned fire steadily, each shot weakening the mech's shields a little more. Inside the tank, conditions were becoming desperate. Warning lights flashed red as systems failed. Smoke filled the compartment from electrical fires. The hull had been breached in several places, and shrapnel rattled around inside like deadly rain. "Hydraulic failure on the gun controls," Dayun reported. "I am switching to manual operation." "Engine temperature is critical," Wu Jin added. "We cannot keep this up much longer." But outside, something unexpected was happening. Other human forces, inspired by the tank's impossible fight, were beginning to attack the Korth from all sides. Defense Force soldiers who had been retreating suddenly turned and charged. Civilians emerged from shelters carrying improvised weapons. So Young Kang was broadcasting the battle live across the colony's emergency network. "The tank is still fighting," she reported. "One ancient human war machine against their biggest mech, and it refuses to give up." War Master Thekron realized his situation was becoming dangerous. His overwhelming technological advantage was meaningless if his troops lost the will to fight. This primitive human machine was becoming a symbol of defiance that could inspire resistance throughout the galaxy. "All units, concentrate fire on the human vehicle," he ordered. "Destroy it now!" But his troops were scattered and demoralized. Half of them were fighting off human counterattacks, while the others hesitated to expose themselves to the tank's deadly accurate gun. Inside the tank, Tejo made a desperate decision. "Wu Jin, ram them, sir." "You heard me. Full speed at the command mech. If we cannot penetrate their shields with shells, maybe we can break them with mass and momentum. That will probably kill us all." "Probably." "Dayun, are you ready to try something crazy?" His granddaughter was already loading their last armor-piercing shell. "Always, grandfather." The tank accelerated toward the command mech, building up speed as it crossed the plaza. War Master Thekron saw them coming and poured maximum firepower at the approaching vehicle. Energy bolts hammered the tank's front armor, creating a cascade of sparks and molten metal. But the tank kept coming. At the last second, just before impact, Dayun fired their final shell at point-blank range. The projectile struck the overloaded shields just as the tank's 60-ton mass slammed into the mech's legs. The combination was too much. The shields collapsed, the shell penetrated the command mech's armor, and the impact sent both machines crashing to the ground in a tangle of metal and sparks. For a moment, the plaza was silent except for the sound of settling debris. Then the tank's engine coughed back to life and the ancient machine began pulling itself free from the wreckage. War Master Thekron's command mech was finished. Its pilot was unconscious, its weapons were destroyed, and its mighty armor was cracked open like an egg. Across the plaza, Korth soldiers stared in shock. Their invincible leader had been defeated by a primitive human war machine that should not even have been able to hurt him. "All Korth forces, this is Sub-Commander Vexkol," came a panicked voice over their communications. "War Master Thekron is down." "Repeat, the War Master is down." The psychological effect was immediate. Korth troops began retreating toward their ships. These humans were clearly more dangerous than intelligence had suggested, and without their leader, they had no stomach for continuing the fight. Within an hour, the entire Korth fleet was leaving the system, carrying news of their defeat back to their empire. The story they told would spread across the galaxy, how an ancient human tank had single-handedly broken their invasion. In the plaza, rescue teams were helping the tank crew out of their battered machine. Tejo emerged first, his uniform torn and his face blackened with smoke. but his eyes were bright with pride. Dayan followed, grinning despite her injuries. Wu Jin came last, shaking his head in amazement at what they had accomplished. The old tank sat amid the wreckage, its armor scarred and smoking, but its engine still running. It had earned its place in history, proving that